Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from Chase Commercial Term Lending and New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Capital One Bank, the Witkoff Group, Greenberg Traurig. Additional funding is provided by grants from AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Colliers International NYC, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, Customers Bank, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Foley & Lardner, Friedman LLP, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investment Developers, Herrick Feinstein, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Chairman USRealty.com, John Katsimides, Red Apple Group, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knuckle Realty Services, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, New Banks, MHP Real Estate Services, People's United Bank, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Sterling Risk, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, The Continuum Company, CUNY TV Foundation, the Moynihan Group, Urban American, and These Friends.
Each and every day, people are moving to offices in New York City. So you hear about office space. How do you find space? How do you deal with a broker? How do you deal with a tenant? What kind of commissions? How do you deal with an owner? It's really a scientific study. So today, on my 717th show of the Stoller Report, I decided to bring together a group of individuals to tell the true story of anatomy of a deal, the leasing of an office in New York City, from the tenant to the broker to the owner to the lawyer. My guests, they include Michael Kent, who is the senior partner at Kent, Beatty & Gordon, Jesse Rubens, who is a partner in the brokerage division of MHP Realty Services, Jeff Schotz, who is the Executive Vice President at SJP Properties. So, Michael, you have a firm that was founded in 1992, and in 1998 you move into this nice building at 425 Park Avenue. Good location, everything, but something's going to happen. The building is being demolished to make way for a new building. So here you are, it's 2014, you're in a situation that you're a prestigious mid-sized law firm, you got to find space. What do you do? How many years is this? You know, it's finally happening. What happens?
A lot of nightmares first. You know, I've been doing real estate for over 30 years, and I thought it would be a lot easier having represented a number of tenants as well as landlords over the years. So I thought this would just kind of fall into the assembly line. But as we got closer to the date of demolition, I really started getting nervous. And as head of the real estate department within the firm, I was charged with putting this whole thing into motion, starting off with finding the broker. And it was doubly a problem because, you know, we have a lease dating back 18 years, and the rates and the rents and so forth were extremely different then. We're on a tower suite, a tower floor on Park Avenue. We compete with the biggest firms, but we're successful because we don't charge nearly as much. So it requires a lot of efficiencies. So we're going to come out of Park Avenue now. We've got to find something less expensive, but we're stepping into a landlord's market. We're going to get killed. So it's doubly important I find the right broker, somebody that I can work with, somebody that I can trust, who understands what we really need, and not somebody who's just going to throw addresses at us.
Now, here's the circumstance. As you said, you're in a space for 18 years. And over the past 2 years, the office market has improved. So when you start thinking about it 2 years ago, you say, hey, I can rent the space. I'm going to get similar space around the city. And maybe I want to be on Park Avenue because Park Avenue is a nice, prestigious address. MHP moved to Park Avenue from 6th Avenue. You know, Park Avenue. SJP on their residential built an apartment building on Park Avenue. So people like Park Avenue. So you think about maybe I'll be on Park Avenue. So how do you find this guy over here, Jess Rubens? You didn't know him. Over your practice in law, you never dealt with MHP.
No, I didn't.
So, but what happens in the community is, how do you hustle business? I'm not putting it in that negative way. How do you find out about potential tenants that you can represent?
Well, it so happens that I have an associate at MHP that has been talking to Michael for years. Basically, this is a business of relationships. My associate, Nick Gilman, had a dialogue and a relationship of sorts.
But how does Nick do this? Is it like a cold call? Is it a science? I mean, I'm trying to understand.
It starts with some information.
Okay, great.
It starts with some information. The information being 425 Park Avenue is going to come down. It's going to be a new development. Everybody in 425 Park, including Kay Scholler, is going to have to move out. So Kay Scholler made a big deal at Boston Properties 250 West 55th, and there were still some tenants left in the building, including KBG. And, you know, Nick had that bit of information and then started with a cold call back in 2012.
You know, you're a real estate lawyer. That's your specialty. But you had never dealt with MHP. How do you look at the brokerage world? I mean, because there are many brokers, okay? You know, there are boutiques, and I call MHP a boutique. And then there are smaller people who are, a certain type, and all these types deal with you, Jeff, okay? Right. From the small little broker to the boutique broker to the publicly held and the large broker. How do you, because it's not only you, now you have 3 partners. You may be the real estate partner, but you also have 2 other partners who agree. How do you take care of the interview process?
I had a short list of brokers that I've dealt with over the years. And then I spoke to other people in the industry that I think very highly of, and I got names from them. And I sat down with them in my office, or we had lunch a couple of times. And that short list got even shorter. And as Jesse said, Nick Gilman, his associate, kept calling. And as a courtesy, because of his perseverance.
So tenacity and perseverance got the deal.
No, not get the deal. It got Jesse in to meet me. And at that point, Jesse, I felt that he understood what we needed. I know that he represented other law firms. He's found places. He's also an attorney. And there was a very...
You want to hold that against them?
No, I didn't. But there was...
Well, good point.
There was I got a very good feeling that I can rely upon him. And a lot of it is just gut, instinct you develop.
So here's the situation, because Jesse, as I said, is a boutique real estate brokerage firm. One of Jesse's great opportunities is because he is a lawyer, so he understands the practice of law, and also the fact that he's done a lot of law firm leases over there. But here you are, you're on Park Avenue. You never thought of the West Side. The West Side, I mean, the only thing you knew about the West Side was getting off the railroad or your partners off the Port Authority. You were looking, how do you decide? The city is rather large, and you have a budget, and you had to meet the proximity. How do you decide, the 2 of you, to look around? Where'd you go? How many buildings did you see before you found 11 Times Square?
We probably toured 30 properties. We vetted, potentially 60, 70, 80 properties. Nothing ever got to Michael's level or his partner's level until we had actually spoken to the agent, previewed the space, and determined that it was something that was potential for them to look at. As I said, we broke up 30 properties in perhaps 4, 5 tours. We started on Park Avenue, but you know, the pricing on Park Avenue had changed from when they had made their deal originally in 1998, and it wasn't the most economic prospect. So then we moved over to what was supposed to be the value proposition of Midtown, which is 3rd Avenue, and that didn't turn out to be such a terrific deal either. So then I said to them, listen, why don't we consider the West Side? You've got 3 out of 4 partners commuting from the West Side, from both Penn Station and Port Authority. The West Side has some nice opportunities now. It's not the garment center anymore. A lot of those garment center properties have been converted into office space, renovations to lobby and elevators. You can have a first-class environment and be closer to your commutation pattern, which is important because those are, you know, that's time spent commuting that you could be, you know, that could be billable hours. So we started to look at the West Side, and we vetted numerous properties on the West Side, and we looked at some older properties, and they were prospects, but the efficiency of the older properties was not the same as we could get in a glass and steel tower such as 11 Times Square.
Now, let's look at the situation. Here's Michael. He's in an office that was really built in the late 90s, 96, 98. No, I'm talking your space. I'm specifically the space, not the building. The practice of law has changed. And what has also changed is the efficiency and use of office space. You know, at one time there was a secretary for X numbers. The size of the office was something over there. Part of what you need today is, you know, and there's more of open space, there's different type of efficiencies. So when he's looking for space, you have the reality that your office, that your partner's office may no longer be the size that it was. You don't really need law libraries to the levels that you had before because everything is computerized. And, you know, as opposed to have offices with sheetrock walls, you have offices today is more of an open space and different approaches and different ideas, you know. So when does the architectural design come in? Is it in the leasing process, or, you know, before you get to the landlord, which we'll get to in a second? I mean, to figure out how much space he needed, how do you determine that? How is that determined?
We approached it from the number of attorneys that you needed to fit in the space, plus support staff. We weren't really approaching it from how many usable square feet do we need, because that doesn't really tell the story of each individual building. It's about efficiency and the number of offices that a certain building or space can generate, because that's the income producing capacity of the space, and that's what we tend to focus on. Efficiency of the space for producing perimeter offices where attorneys can work and bill hours.
You've been over here for years. You have this practice of law. Many of your clients really don't come over to the office that much. I mean, some of them come over there. How do you make the change from Park Avenue and the East Side when Jesse's showing you the new world, the West Side, which you've been on the commuting side, but you haven't? How do you take that?
It's the reality of the marketplace. We polled a couple of our clients, more significant clients, whether they really cared. There was even some talk about possibly looking downtown, but we steered away from that.
Did you ever get downtown?
No, we didn't. We did not go downtown. We felt that it would be inconvenient to a lot of clients, frankly. But in terms of moving to the West Side, I asked the principal of perhaps our largest client, and his response was, Michael, I don't care if you practice in your basement, just be my lawyer. So, you know, you get some of that too. And you know, being on Park Avenue is perhaps more important for out-of-town people who are looking for lawyers. We do a lot of international work. They love Park Avenue because a lot of them come in and do shopping half the day, and then they meet with us the other half of the day. Once we...
You could give them a shuttle or a Uber around.
No, but the important thing was, you know what actually sold us? When we went to 11 Times Square. Because the other buildings we looked at, they were nice, a couple of them, but they didn't quite do it. When we saw 11 Times Square, it spoke to us. And this is not supposed to be a plug for your building as much as it's reality.
But
You're
let's,
100% right.
okay, but let's look at 11 Times Square, because, you know, when you hear Times Square, people from around the world have different perceptions. You know, Times Square is Broadway, it's the ball, it's the mega thing. Times Square is major retail today. But 11 Times Square is different, in my opinion, than truly Times Square. Because Times Square, if you're in the, as they would say, in the triangle of Times Square, the hustle and bustle and the lights and everything could kill you. I mean, it's a different thing. I mean, when SJP went to 11 Times Square, this was your first office building in New York City. How do you guys decide on 11 Times Square?
Well, we spent many years studying Manhattan, studying the buildings, studying locations, studying demographics to really understand where New York was headed. Back in the late 70s, our partner Prudential was a key component to the redevelopment of what is called Times Square. We were opportunistic, found a wonderful location, and were able to develop 11 Times Square. But that was only after, again, years of studying the market, understanding the market, knowing what was going to be successful.
When 11 Times Square was, I mean, it got caught with a recession, but when it was originally thought of, did you think that there would be a large preponderance in the professional services business, the financial services, the law firm business, or what type of tenants did you perceive originally?
We thought the three core industries were going to be professional, were going to be technology, and we're going to be financial service. Yes, we actually thought there would be a larger degree of financial service, but again, as you said, that was before the recession that we've had, and so it shifted a bit. It's turned out that we've had more technology and more professional, but nevertheless, it still fit within the core three that we always anticipated to be the prime tenants for the building.
You could have gone to some of the Times Square buildings that we spoke about, you know, relatively new, like Boston Properties, which is not really Times Square. It's on 55th Street and 8th Avenue, which really would have been a double commute for Michael, which for purposes, it wouldn't have been that valuable because of the transportation. You'd have to get off the train or the bus, and you'd have to walk, or you'd take the train. How do you perceive 11 Times Square?
Well, we actually looked at some properties directly in the bow tie on Times Square, and that was overwhelming for us. We were in a mid-rise floor, and we were looking directly at billboards that were blinking and
Dodging Elmo and Batman and...
Yeah, it was just between the tourist traffic and the billboards and the lights of Broadway. It was really, it just didn't feel like a comforting environment for KBG to work in. So going 1 Avenue West to an emerging 8th Avenue, you know, north of 40th Street now on 8th Avenue is becoming completely developed, and to a beautifully finished new glass and steel tower with tremendous tenants, Microsoft and Proskauer Rose being the main tenants, and great ownership, frankly. Jeff was very accommodating from day one. When he heard of our interest, he said, listen, you know, let me cut through it. We have a great agent, JLL. But I'm going to come to your office and I'm going to finish this deal. So
now let's get back to the tenant. So Jess shows you a property. This was really the first relatively brand new building, because it's a couple of years old, 11 Times Square, and it has, you know, LEED green, platinum certification. It has all the environmental situations. It has, you know, restaurants in the building, you know, coupled with, as I said, it's directly across the street from the Port Authority. You know, it's 8 blocks away from Penn Station. So how do you and your partners perceive Times Square? You're a Park Avenue guy. You know, all of a sudden, going to be in Times Square?
We will be. And the whole sense of dread we had at the beginning with the move, and no matter where we went, it wasn't going to be Park Avenue. that sense of dread has been replaced by a sense of excitement. We are very much looking forward to this move because it's a different atmosphere, and we're prepared to embrace it. And we backstage in your green room, I was pushing Jeff to accelerate the build out so we can get in a little bit earlier. It's not like we're going to hang in to Park Avenue any longer than we have.
So now you have a situation, you figure it out financially what you can afford. He knows the parameters of what you can afford, and now here's the mean, tough landlord. You know what the word landlord is, lord of the land, okay? But he's not really mean. He's really cushiony. He's a softie over there. He's like the Pillsbury doughboy. You can really get a lot out of him. So how do you negotiate, okay? When does the owner get into full involvement on a lease? What's the steps and the procedures? Okay, Jesse's over here. Michael and his partners have looked at the building. They've toured the building. How do you make a determination of what type of deal you're going to make? Because moving is more than just moving physically. There is renovation. There's you have to build out a space. There's construction. Besides the construction, it's improvements. It's the number of months of maybe free rent during a period of time, and then there's the security. How do you look at that?
Well, as Jesse said a moment ago, we do have an agent, Jones Lang LaSalle, on our building. They meet with Jesse initially. They tour with Michael and his partners initially. They work the deal to a point where ultimately the landlord steps in and we sit down and we work out a deal. You need to have motivated parties. I think Michael and his partners decided that 11 Times Square was where they wanted to be. We had a piece of space that we thought worked very well for them, wanted to make a deal with them. And so we sat down and we worked out the terms. So they have certain needs, we have certain needs. We put together our heads and we came up with a deal that works for everyone.
So, from my viewers, I'm trying to figure out, and I'm not asking the specifics, I'm asking the generalizations on when you offer, and you've approved through JLL and through MHP, how many months do you normally offer in, because they have to move, there's a build-up expense, there's other improvements. How many months of, let's say, free rent or concession do you normally give to a new tenant?
Every deal is unique. It has its unique characteristics. As we were talking earlier in the green room, depends on what the tenant's needs are. Okay? Some tenants are capital adverse, don't want to spend any money in building out the space or going through the cost of relocating. So that may be an area where we might focus. On the other hand, perhaps the space doesn't require as much in the way of capital and a build out. And yes, then we're in a position to be able to offer the tenant some concessions. Collectively, perhaps we end up with a deal where there's a little bit of tenant improvement and there's some free rent that allows the tenant the comfort to know that they've got a deal that they can be comfortable with.
You're in a business that requires, I always joke that December 31 comes and there's a new year and you sell your services over here. How do you, right now, over 16 years of your life, you haven't had any additional capital improvement. How do you fund certain of the expenses that are not paid for by Jeff, okay, and Prudential on this deal? And how do you, you may be a good law firm, but he doesn't know you, so he needs, as we would say, a security level of having a security deposit. How do you, as a tenant, both as the tenant and also as the lawyer, look at the deal to take care of those financial obligations?
Well, that's just a question of looking at cash reserves that are available and line of credit and figuring out, what's best to tap into at any given time, interest rates and so forth. But that was kind of the least of it at the end. It was getting to that point where we had to worry about it. And I'd like to say that in all the years I've been doing this, this may have been the most well-handled transaction that I've ever been involved in. Of course, this is the only time as a tenant, but as a lawyer, I couldn't believe how smoothly it went at the end. When we had hiccups, Jeff stepped in, which was just mentioned. Jeff just stepped in and said, what's the problem? He visited us at our office early one morning, and that's the problem, done. And we were done. We had a term sheet, and I was able to go on vacation for 2 weeks with an easy head. And the lease was just as easy, except for the fact it was 112 pages. But
hey, somebody had
One lawyer to another, right?
now, but
Proskauer has to get some business.
Right.
now here's the question. In the business cycle, and I'm leaving Michael on this. I'm talking to you in the broker's side and you in the owner's side. How long this process took from the beginning? I'm not talking about moving in. From the time that you were retained by Kent to the time that you signed the lease, this took maybe less than 60 days, right?
No, more than 6 years. I met Michael in mid-May, was hired in mid-July. We probably had agreed upon term sheet end of August.
So, but
And
what
then
I'm
perhaps Michael went on vacation for 2 weeks, so we lost a little time, and then we were
but what
done
I'm
in
saying is
4
you
weeks from there.
basically, after being retained, you closed this within 90 days.
That's about right.
Okay, you close it.
About right.
In the normal process, how long does it normally take that you've seen deals to take to close?
Well, I can't speak for
No, I'm
the
talking
part
about
that Jesse is involved with before they come out to start the touring process.
right, but how long from normally when you meet the first tenant to close? How long is that normally to get the term sheet to a signed lease?
Depending a lot upon the tenant's timing. Some tenants have a more urgent need to move. Other tenants have enough time where there's no real sense of urgency. But typically, from the time that we first meet until we agree to terms, it can be anywhere from 60 to 90 days, typical. In the case of Kent Beatty, we happened to establish a very good connection with them. I think there was a good level of comfort with all parties. And so we were able to cut through a lot of the minutia that typically slows down a deal a bit, and we're able to get right to the terms.
And how long will it take from the signed lease to getting the tenant into the space?
In their case, their lease is expiring in the early spring, so there wasn't the sense of urgency that we might have in turning around. But we can build out space in less than 2 months, or depending upon the tenant's expiration, it can perhaps take a little bit longer because of the lack of urgency in getting them in.
And do you see that normally in the business?
Not all landlords are willing to commit to an accelerated construction schedule. We had to dovetail their not only lease expiration, but absolute, full stop, have to be out of the building.
Yeah, because
they're taking it down
otherwise they're
around
knocking.
us.
I could see the firm. Okay, I'm in the middle of doing a contract. Oh no, you're not. This building is going to go.
Right. So we had to make sure that we had a landlord who was willing to commit, and put some teeth behind that commitment to getting them in by April 1. And Jeff said, okay, fine. Here's the building's architect. You have to agree on the program immediately, and they got working drawings done in 6 weeks.
So as I said before, I've done shows talking about markets, but here at least we really talked about the anatomy of a deal, and I'd like to thank the players on that deal, Michael Kent, Jesse Rubens, and Jeff Schotz, and I'll see you next week.